that is very, very scary. You know, what women face at the hands of men, at the hands of our state, is a very, very tormenting and a very painful thing to actually live through. So number one, obviously, it fights against that. You know, we're aware that women don't hold as great spaces. You know, they don't hold majority spaces in corporate spaces, in parliamentary spaces, in spaces where they can represent the country and represent, you know, different parts of this country. Women don't hold that space. You know what I mean? Women are not represented like we should be, you know, in parliament, in different spheres of this country, in different spheres that actually run this country. Women are not represented. We see sports, you know, Banyana is not sponsored as much as Bafana Bafana. Viewership is less, you know what I mean? So patriarchy is the root of all those problems, you know, of all those issues. So what feminism does is, you know, it fights against those issues that we face in South Africa. And I not try only fight about what we actually are facing in South Africa alone, but rather Africa as a whole. You know, because women in the African society are living in a very tormenting space, like I said, a very scary place, you know, and it's very important that we really fight against that and we advocate for women, you know, to be represented and to live a just life, you know what I mean?
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Leaders Podcast. You're here because you believe that you too have been called to build and live an impactful life. Right, this episode's guest is formerly known as the founder and executive director of Khulisa Mfazi, an organization that aims to create a mission that aims to empower women by creating conversations on issues that mainly affect women, by creating spaces to learn, educate, and most importantly, rise. Currently, she's been enrolled at the University of Pretoria, informally known as UP, where she's studying towards her LLB degree. In June 16, 2019, she was featured on NewzRoom Africa, where she spoke about the lessons and how the narrative of the 1974 uprising are still relevant in today's society. She's been featured on platforms such as the Galda magazine, a UK-based magazine for women and non-binary individuals. Letlotlo, thank you so much for joining us here at the Leaders Podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It was amazing. Thank you.
Good. Now, just to really start off this interview, Letlotlo, I really want to go down memory lane. People know that our relationship is one that did not start in preparation for this interview, but I've been in spaces where I've seen you grow into the person that you are today. I had the privilege to witness you grow into the Letlotlo that you are, and I really just wanted to say how much you've inspired me. And I hope that as we delve into this interview, that a lot of girls listening who are going to join on really gain a lot of inspiration from this.
Thank you so much, Mpo. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. But you're right. I mean, we've known each other since I was in grade 8. You were in grade 9. Yeah. You know, you've listened to my thoughts grow. You've watched my thoughts grow. You've seen me turn into this ball, you know, of dynamite into who I am today. You know, me challenging our deputy principal, me challenging management, you guys inviting me into arguments in order to hear a woman's perspective, which I'll always be grateful for. You know what I mean? But yeah, thank you so much. You're right. Our relationship doesn't start now. And like you said, I started Khulisa Mfazi actually when I was in grade 11. You know, and that was because, I remember very well, that was because Ubageng, who you've also interviewed, Ubageng came to me and he was like, Letlotlo, you know what? Stop wasting time. You know, and he literally came to me, he's like, you can do so much more. Stop wasting time. You have so much potential. Stop wasting time. And I started just thinking about that. That really touched me because I started thinking about, okay, what's the way forward? You know, and since then, you know, in grade 11, since then, I was very passionate about, women empowerment. I was very passionate about feminism. I was very passionate about work that different women are doing in different parts of the world. And I was reading more and more and more about that. So I then decided, you know what, because this is something that I feel that I'm very passionate about, and this is something that I can challenge, and this is something that I feel that I can contribute towards, why not start something? And I was only in grade 11, and that's when I had a passion for writing. I used to write literally every single week, every second week. And that's when I decided that, okay, I should use what I'm passionate about, writing, and just merge it with what I believe my social responsibility is, which is, women's advocacy and feminism, and I decided to merge those together, and that's when I started my blog. And yeah, that was a very interesting time in my life.
I think we can both agree the challenges that you went through, and how you've over time grown to be much more articulate about this thing that means a lot to you, feminism, this topic. And I really wanted us to also just delve into your world of feminism, so that we do justice to this topic of feminism.
Cool.
For a very long time, sadly for me, as a young Black 20-year-old male in South Africa, much of my definition of feminism has been defined by social media, which has kind of propelled this negative stigma towards how I view feminists. And you hear a lot of questions asking, a lot of people saying, why are feminists so angry? Or why is feminism isn't a thing? So to start us off, I really want to delve into what does feminism mean to you? And most importantly, what would be your definition? Letlotlo Morule's definition of feminism.
Cool. Number one, let me just start off with the interesting part that you spoke about, that why are women so angry? Why feminists so angry? Number one, I think we must understand that is granted. With years and years of systematic oppression that women have faced, at the hands of the state, at the hands of men, I think that anger is granted, and I think that it is not really a great perception for individuals to have, and a great question for people to have as to why are feminists so angry, because I believe that anger is granted. You know what I mean? But what feminism really means to me is, number one, obviously advocating and really fighting against patriarchy. Number one, that's the basis of feminism, fighting against patriarchy and fighting against the systematic oppression that women face on a daily basis. We're aware of the high and alarming rates of gender-based violence across the world. Not just South Africa, of course, South Africa also, but across the world, gender-based violence is alarming. It is a terrifying space to live as a woman. The statistics also in South Africa, number one, we are classed as, the number one rape country. That is very, very scary. What women face at the hands of men, at the hands of our state, is a very, very tormenting and a very painful thing to actually live through. So number one, obviously it fights against that. We're aware that women don't hold as great spaces. They don't hold majority spaces in corporate spaces, in parliamentary spaces, in spaces where they can represent the country and represent, different parts of this country. Women don't hold that space. You know what I mean? Women are not represented like we should be, in parliament, in different spheres of this country, in different spheres that actually run this country. Women are not represented. We see sports, Banyana Banyana is not sponsored as much as Bafana Bafana. Viewership is less, you know what I mean? So patriarchy is the root of all those problems, of all those issues. So what feminism does is, it fights against those issues that we face in South Africa. And I not try only fight about what we actually are facing in South Africa alone, but rather Africa as a whole. Because women in the African society are living in a very tormenting space, like I said, a very scary place. And it's very important that we really fight against that, and we advocate for women, to be represented and to live a just life. You know what I mean?
Just you really like I really want to unpack this, because I really found it quite striking. You spoke about women living a just life, right? I think I would be genuinely interested in, if possible, what would be some of the things that, like, some of the action steps that we can ensure that women live a just life? And what does a just life actually mean?
I think number one is educating ourselves, and not being blind and naive to the injustices that women face on a daily basis. So many of us, especially, middle class citizens, many of us, we just continue living our life despite having a bit of awareness that women are actually living in injustices. Women are actually living in trying times, let me rather say. And number one that we can do is really educate ourselves and understand that, okay, women are living in these type of circumstances. And once you educate yourself, that opens a different mindset, new thoughts as to, okay, now how can I actually work towards working with women, or working, actually contributing towards the fight against the type of circumstances that women are living in, right? Number two, I think as men, I think it's a very important role that men need to play, because at the end of the day, the rape statistics are high because of men. The rape statistics are high because of toxic masculinity. So many things so many things are affecting us as women because of the perpetrators, and unfortunately the perpetrators are men. So it is very important that men actually stop living in this victim mentality. So many men, when you address them and you tell them that actually this is the reality of the life of the South African women, many of them become very defensive. Many of them say not all men, you know what I mean? And saying not all men, granted, I understand that, but how does that contribute to the struggle? How does that contribute to the fight? You know what I mean? So it is very important that instead of men being very defensive, men wanting to shove us away, men wanting us to lower our voices, and stop breathing the fire that we breathe on a daily basis. Instead of that, women really need to come to the party and be part of the conversation. Just like Chimamanda Adichie said, we can all be feminists. It is very important, but it is also very important to now listen. Listen, don't gaslight, don't devalue the how can I even put this? Don't devalue how if someone tells you that this is what I'm going through, don't try and diminish that experience, is what I'm trying to say. Yes. And that is what is important for men to sit back and listen and say, hey, you guys are going through this, how can we help? As opposed to just trying and attempting to just fight us away, push us away, shove us away, and really, invalidate our experiences.
Just to really follow up on what you said, what Chimamanda Adichie, where she's like, we can all be feminists.
Yeah.
Your organization, Khulisa, you've got this myopic focus on feminism, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to talk more about what does it mean in the 20th century to be a feminist in a rapidly evolving world. And if men, like, I'm actually interested in the transition. Like, if one says, I'm a feminist, what are some action steps that we can do in our own spaces, in our own families, that embody that?
Cool. So Khulisa Mfazi, number one, our mission and our vision, it is number one to educate society about the injustices that women face on a daily basis. And number two is to celebrate women that rise above trying times and rise above trying circumstances. And then number three is to give women the platform to share their stories however they want and whenever they want. And I do that through our podcast, the Women's Club. So number one, I think, in terms of, that is how Khulisa Mfazi actually, in terms of embodying, the idea of feminism and the concept of feminism, I think that is how we try and transcend that to society by doing that. About your question regarding how men can actually now contribute to the fight of feminism, I think I have an article actually on Khulisa Mfazi on our blog that you can actually check out. I wrote it years ago, I think in 2018 or 2019, I'm not sure, but I wrote it a while ago. If you just scroll down, you'll check it out. But it just basically says, how men can contribute to the fight. And I basically talk about the things that I spoke about earlier, that listen, this is not your struggle, it's ours, so listen. Men have a problem with sitting and just listening. Many times we have our great fighters in society. We have our Chris Hanis, our Nelson Mandelas, our MLK. We've got so many amazing men, and that is granted, and that will always be celebrated. But it is important for men now to say, okay, in this fight, which is not ours, which we cannot really, we can't understand it. You cannot understand how it is, number one, to be raped by a man, unless you, of course, are a victim of rape. Men are also victims of rape. But it is just very, very important to just sit back, and listen and understand that, okay, these are the trying times, and that is what we do through Khulisa Mfazi, through the educating and through really trying to pass on and showing society these are the circumstances that women go through on a daily basis, and we need you to understand this. You know what I mean? So my number one thing to men is always listen, always listen, and don't try and diminish or invalidate the circumstances that women have been going through every single day. Don't diminish the fights that women have with themselves and with society and with the state, at hands of men. Because you understand that sometimes I could go to any man, you know what I mean? I could go to any man and try and share my experience. However, the first thing they'll think about is she telling the truth? What was she wearing? Did she try and report it? And honestly, that is the one time where the victim is always turned into the perpetrator. And men need to understand that, let us not contribute to this problem in society that we have. Instead, let us sit down with our wives, with our moms, with our little sisters, you know what I mean, and try and actually fight against these cycles of oppression that they're actually facing.
What I really love about what you said is it kind of highlights the whole thing of how men try to justify the level of ignorance, right? In the sense that just because it does not affect us, therefore it is not real. Or try to justify or trying to connect the puzzle to justify our view. And I think it really gets me thinking about how it is in my family, with my own sisters, my own mother. It kind of makes me audit my actions and how certain things, how I behave at home, have been fed, by just this level of ignorance towards things my brothers and sisters. So just really given your notion of feminism, how do you guys at Khulisa, I know you touched a lot on some of the projects you guys are working, but I really wanted us to unpack a lot some of the work.
What are some of the work that we're doing?
Yes, some of the work that Khulisa is doing.
Cool. So the most recent project that we've been doing is obviously the podcast. The podcast is called The Women's Club. I know this is your podcast, but check it out, guys. Yeah. But the podcast is called The Women's Club, and that is basically the second leg of Khulisa Mfazi and the voice of Khulisa Mfazi. And on that podcast, basically, we share many experiences that different women are going through. We share, we talk about the rape culture, for example. We talk about many different things that affect women, in contribution to the fight against patriarchy. And our most recent project actually is called Phone Call Conversations with the Women's Club. And what basically that is it embodies our, one of our missions actually in Khulisa Mfazi, to give women the platform to share their stories in whatever manner, however they want to share it, you know what I mean? And celebrate women also that are really, have really come up of trying times. And that is what Phone Call Conversations with the Women's Club is. So what we basically do is, number one, what we're trying to do is try and be innovative and creative during this lockdown, because obviously now, we have to rely on technology, and I can't go physically, we can't conduct interview physically like you would have hoped for with the leadership podcast, for example, so with the leaders podcast. So, what we do is we have a phone call conversation, a raw conversation that I have with someone that I adore, with someone that I believe is working amazing, someone who's doing amazing work, with someone I believe that is changing the narrative and, stereotypes perhaps attached to feminism, or, who's contributing, that girl next door who's contributing to society one step at a time, who is not celebrated as much as, your big philanthropists, for example, who is actually doing impactful work, and just, we just talk about that. her and I, whoever that is, I featured Candace Chira, for example. Candace Chira calls herself the Minister of Menstruation, and what she does is she debunks, the stigma of menstruation. That is health of menstruation. So I speak to her. I've spoken to her. I've spoken to women like recently. My recent work is actually Lenanza. Lenanza is a DJ, and sometimes it's very interesting to move away, from the thought-provoking spaces to actually find out how women are doing in the entertainment spaces. So I try and really find women from different spheres of lives, walking different walks in life, from different backgrounds, who are walking, different walks, to just find out, how are you doing? What are you doing? Congratulations. And let's talk about what you've accomplished. And I think that is really, really cool for women just to share their stories, however they want to share their stories. So that is what we've been doing. And, we also write, of course, my blog, we write, and through that blog, we are sharing experiences, that South African women are going through. And of course, myself, I do have, I can only experience what I've experienced, and that is what I share mostly. So that is what we do on Khulisa Mfazi.
One of the things I really admired about you, we both know that Khulisa started with just only you. Over the past years, you've spent a lot of the time nurturing a team of high impact young individuals who are amazing as individuals. And now you guys are focusing on impacting institutions like varsities, and just really trying to remind them the importance of women in institutional places. And I really just wanted to just give you credit for that, because I know you spoke about how you're reaching out to women, but I know you've also done in your own space empower women that you either know directly and in turn learned from that.
Okay, cool. So I think it's really important that we don't work alone, because there is more impact. 5 minds are more powerful than 1 mind. You only know through your experiences, and there are 5 more experiences that can actually enhance your experience, therefore enrich the learning that you do, and enhance the learning that you can actually give, the teachings that you can actually give. So it's been very, very interesting, working with the team. It's been amazing, because I have learned more than I would have ever thought. I thought, sometimes you get into a space and you think as much as you know everything. What I mean? And generally speaking, nobody ever knows everything, because you don't experience everything in the world. You don't read every book in the world. We all have, you don't listen to the same people. You don't experience the same people. We all walk very different paths in our lives. And that is the reason why you just learn more, and you are just a much better person when you bring people into your vision, and you try and really drill that vision into everyone's minds, and try and feed off that passion that you have and feed it off to different people. So it is a very difficult thing, but it was also a very it is amazing. It is amazing just being in a space where people want to hear what you say, where people want to do what you do, where people think that your work is important enough, and that actually you can actually impact on the world. You can actually give back to the world. You know what I mean? And just being able to just call someone and be like, hey, look, I don't know the answer to this. What do you think it is? You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we don't know the answer to every problem. We don't have the answers to every problem. And that's why it's so important to have a tribe, to have a small tribe that holds your hand and that walks with you, and that unpacks this passion that you have, and unpacks this vision that you have, and kind of gives it off, and helps you to really give, and to become this chain between yourself and between and to the people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Wow, thanks for that. I think while you're answering, your answer kind of cuts across this concept or the saying that if you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone. And it kind of really got me thinking about how we choose to expose or put ourselves in certain environments that feed or support our cause. So yeah, I really just want to talk more about talking about learning, right? Learning from others. One of the things that I've learned and found most impactful are researching you is in one of your articles entitled "Growing Up in a Middle Class Family in Post-Apartheid South Africa," in which you kind of delve into this notion of how growing up you felt that the color of your skin disadvantaged you and placed you at the bottom of South Africa's social hierarchy. I chose this part as when I read it, I felt not only did it kind of like not only did I process it intellectually, but I felt that I could relate to those emotions. Being a black kid, growing up in a thing like cocaine, in a village like cocaine, I know you in your article you talk about your shift from Mafikeng into a hybrid racial community in Johannesburg, and some of the challenges you spoke. So I really wanted to unpack this part, like to anybody who's listening who I believe will relate to this specific caption of the thing. Can you unpack and take us back to what you were going through when you that made decisions?
So at the age of 9, like you said, I moved from Mafikeng and I moved to Johannesburg. And when I moved to Johannesburg, I couldn't speak English. You know, I could not, you know, express my thoughts in English. I could not, you know, I was shy to put my hand up. And you know, my best friend reminds me every single day that, Letlotlo, do you remember that you could not even speak English? You know what I mean? But now, look at you now. You know, so that was a very interesting time for me, very, very interesting time, because you get into a space where everyone speaks English. Your level of intelligence is also kind of marked by English. You know, when you mess up once, when your tongue rolls, you know, too fast, when you know, when you don't say that word, when you don't pronounce that word correctly, or, you know, those small mess ups that we can have, you know, in terms of articulating ourselves in English, when we face that, everyone starts laughing. You know, you're a ridicule, you're a joke, you're embarrassment, you know, because you cannot articulate yourself as well in English. And now you get into a space like Johannesburg, you move from a space like Mafikeng where I spoke Setswana 24/7, even in class. You know, you speak Setswana 24/7. The only person that speaks English is the teacher. You know, that you speak Setswana 24/7, and then you move into a space where the teacher speaks English, the kids speak English. It's just a lot to take in, and it becomes very, very overwhelming. You know, so it was just a very, very interesting time. You know, I had to take extra classes. I had to take extra English and math classes. I had to, you know, try and really find my place in you know, in this melting pot. You know, I had to now, you know, move from a place where we now spoke Setswana as a first language to where now Zulu is also, you know, is up there in terms of languages. You must be able to speak Zulu, otherwise, you know, you can't move around in Johannesburg. So it was just a very, very interesting time for me, very extremely interesting time for me. You know, I started picking up books. I started befriending people that can actually help me articulate myself a little bit better. And it was very interesting. It shaped my mind quite a lot, you know, in a positive and a negative way, you know, because then you start doubting yourself, you know, because now your level of intelligence is now set by these European standards, you know, by the ability to speak English. You know, despite how well I could speak Setswana there, and nobody cares about that. Everyone now wants you to speak English, otherwise you're not intelligent. So it really, of course, it grows you linguistically, because you should be able to speak many different languages, but also it really just, you know, it also has, you know, that those negative, you know, connotations to it, that, you know, should I, you know, be regarded, should English have such a high regard in our life as Black Africans? So it's just a very interesting question, and it was a very interesting time in my life, you know, trying to move away from Mafikeng to this melting pot, you know, where now English is so important, you know.
I really find that interesting in the sense that kind of shows what the effort you put into making sure that, because now English is now a standard of intelligence, you spend much of your time growing up making sure that you can articulate this language. And what I really want to delve into is really what you were telling yourself. Trying to figure out what were you telling yourself when you had, like, you're now in this new environment. English is the standard of being smart or intelligence. What were some of your internal conversations, and if there were any, like, who played that role in keeping you going?
It's interesting. That's very interesting. Number one, I was so young. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't remember those internal conversations. But what I do remember is being forced. It wasn't something that was willing. I wasn't willing to learn English. I was not, of course, physically I was willing, but emotionally I felt like I was parting away with like half of myself. You know what I mean? I was put into that situation because of the circumstances and because of the surroundings that I was in. I could have stayed in Mafikeng my whole life. And if my parents had not relocated and found jobs here in Johannesburg, I could have stayed in Mafikeng my whole life. Who knew where I would have been? But number one, I don't think I would have been here where I am. I don't think I would have met you, obviously. But I don't think there were any internal conversations. I think I just forced myself because of now I had to assimilate with this new culture. When you get into an environment, in order for you not to be, that weird girl, in order for you to really, merge and be one with the culture, you need to do the things that the people of that culture do. And one of them is being able to speak like they do, or being able to dress like they do, being able to move like they do, walk like they walk. And that's what I was telling myself at that young age. I mean, I was only 9 years old, 9 until 13 years old. I really taught myself, okay, how are you going to become a person in this new environment? How are you going to get these people to actually notice your being? And in order for them to notice your being is for you to do what they do and for you to talk like they talk. And that was, I think, my inspiration, and not necessarily my internal conversation, but what really drove me, to become the person that I was then, and to that really groomed me to become the person that I am today.
Wow. So Letlotlo, like in the latter part of your article specifically, you talk about, and you go back, so you start about growing up from Mafikeng into Johannesburg, and in the latter part you then go back to like feminism, and you speak about how patriarchal societies have over time grown to appreciate European traits over African traits. And we should elaborate and walk the reader through their journey into your journey, and how you found comfort in Eurocentric standards. Can you dissect this for me? And most importantly, like, what were some of your personal experiences kind of put you to come to such a consensus?
I think this is actually a very sad story. I think when I think back onto it, I think this is very, very sad. Because growing up, for example, I used to search things. I mean, we all have phones, like let's say grade 5, I'd search things like how to be lighter, how to be more beautiful, how to, things like that. I was not comfortable with the color of my skin. I definitely was not comfortable with the color of my skin. There was also a time when yellow bones, it was a thing to be a yellow bone. All the boys were looking at yellow bones. And now when you're at that fragile age where, you want boys to notice you, but, also you're trying to play it cool. You know what I mean? Now you start changing your appearance. You want to go out and be a little bit more prettier. You want boys now to talk to you and everything. And through that phase of growing up, also I realized that actually I'm not happy with the color of my skin. You search, you go through my history on my phone, you'll see things like how to be more beautiful, like I said, how to be, fairer skinned, how to have straighter hair, so number one, I think if I was 12 right now, 12 or 11, I wouldn't be able to rock my hair like this. I would be very, very uncomfortable with the way I look, with how I was created. So that really is that part where I talk about how I found myself having to really become subordinate, or having to really submit myself to Eurocentric standards, to Eurocentric beauty standards. And not only beauty standards, also, like we spoke about a bit earlier, linguistically. We as Black people for so long, we unconsciously submit ourselves to Eurocentric ways. Growing up, we laugh at each other speaking. We laugh at each other because we're dark skinned. We have these disses, those disses that, when the light switches off, you're so dark. You know what I'm saying? And that is because of this unhappiness, this unconscious unhappiness that we actually face within ourselves because of the color of our skin. Growing up, we're not, of course, now because we're older, we are able to really, dissect that and really move away from that type of mindset. Because when you are older, you have much more control over your thoughts and your mindset, right? But now when you're younger and when you're growing and you're in this environment, it becomes very difficult, and you fall into that, into that trap of not loving yourself, of not loving your skin, of not loving your hair, of not loving who you are and the beautiful blackness and the black person that you are. So it was a very sad time, I think, for myself, because when I look back, I think my self-esteem was crushed. It was to the ground. It is nothing that I wish my little sisters would go through. It was terrible, 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 terrible. But now that I've grown and that I look back on it, you just reflect and you think, these were the standards that the Europeans had, and these are the standards that were really, they were just choking. These standards were just choking me, literally. And yeah, I think that was just a very sad time in my life. And yeah, it was an interesting time too.
So talking about beauty, and given how you have now grown into your new perception of beauty, and now you've become comfortable in your own skin,
yes,
walk me through, like, having been exposed to that level of information, or like perception in terms of how this is the standard. Walk me through how you shifted. Walk me through how you managed to be like, what, I'm gonna be comfortable in my skin, I'm gonna appreciate my hair, I'm gonna start doing certain things. Walk me through like some of your thinking around that, and what were some of the action steps that you did, or were there certain environments that made it easier for you to do that?
Yeah,
which I think is quite interesting.
So I think moving to Phokeng, right, and going to school in Phokeng, having the great privilege of going to the Second Royal College of the Royal Bafokeng, I was moving into a space of Black excellence, number one. So I only now started challenging myself in terms of, what does Blackness really mean, and what does being Black actually mean to me? The color of my skin, my hair, and everything. I started moving into that type of thinking only when I moved into a Black space. And luckily for me, that was high school. So I went into high school. I started doing a lot of reading. You start meeting, you're now in this Black created space. You now see a visual understanding of what Black excellence actually means. We hear of it here, we hear of it there, but now when you move into that space, now you see it. You see it. Now you've moved into this royal space and you see it and you start to appreciate it. So that's when I started really thinking to myself, okay, what does Blackness really mean to me? What does my self-esteem, how is my self-esteem actually connotated to, you could say maybe my embarrassment at that time to be Black or whatever. And I started reading a lot. I started reading and reading and reading and reading a lot. And through that reading, and also through the works of other Black women, through talks of other Black women, through just mental work of telling myself that, what, God made no mistake here. There's a reason, and there's a reason why you're like this. You know what I'm saying? And there's a reason why your skin is darker, your hair is like that. It took a lot of mental work, a lot of mental simulation, a lot of growth, me telling myself, mantras or whatever that you can call them, really me telling myself each and every day that actually, you know what, you are beautiful. You are dark-skinned, yes, because we also tend to kind of move away from the obvious. You are, I wouldn't say I am dark-skinned. I think I'm a bit fairer toned, but you but you are darker. You have this hair. It took a lot of mental work, a lot of reading, being in a space where Black people are now appreciated, being in a space where Black people are the leaders and pioneers of a specific space, being back in a space where speaking Setswana is not weird. You know what I mean? Your second language is Setswana. I moved back to that space. It's like time traveling. So I moved back into that space now, where we speak Setswana in class with our teachers. It's like it's like a normal thing. We only get taught in English. So it's like that time travel, and that time travel did me really well. It did me very, very good, because that's when now my thoughts started really coming together. I started becoming a bit radical, understanding politically who I am, where I stand in society, why it's so powerful. So yeah, I think number one, that high school experience was, a blessing. And yeah, that is how I really moved into that.
What I really like about your answer is that you focus a lot on, you're at a point in which you're at your lowest, and having been exposed to now the environment, which was high school at the time, you start focusing on what you can control, right? So you walk into the space, you see a lot of Black excellence, and I was there to kind of witness it, the growth of Letlotlo Morule. Like Lebone, we've got such high caliber students, both from the community and from outside, coming into this institution and really embodying the Black excellence. Kind of how for myself, even how being in that space kind of shapes behavior, and that behavior kind of shapes your actions, and the outcome kind of like pivots the trajectory of your life. Going back to Khulisa, just to talk more about the impact and what you want to be. What are some of the hopes and dreams of the organization? I know this year you spend a lot of time making sure that you've got a solid team, which I think that is something that's going to come over the years to come. What are some of the hopes? And if any people want to join your movement of feminism on the continent, and I believe on the globe, how can people who are interested be part of it?
You know what? Something that I really, really would love to do, and if this happens, is when I know that, I have accomplished my mission in life, and that is really making a mark and creating my footsteps, and really imprinting my footprint in different African countries. And that is what I'd like to do, listen and be educated of other African women's, circumstances, lives, lessons that they've learned, in their different surroundings. If there's one thing that I'd really love to do, is imprint my footprint in different African societies, and really, create that, that tribe of Africanness, and where we can really come together as African women. Because I think these borders have done so much damage. The Europeans have really accomplished what they wanted. Colonizers really accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, and these borders have really, really created a lot of damage. And it is very important that before anything, really, we are African. And as African women, we've got so much to share. We've got so much to learn, and learn from, especially each other. So just being in a deeply rooted African space and really learning from a deeply African space is one thing. If Khulisa Mfazi, achieves, is one thing that, I can even die the next day. I will be very content. I will be very content, and I believe that I would really have marked off, that mission and that to do on my list.
Talking about hopes and dreams of Khulisa, I want to just now, before we wrap up the interview, just really delve into Letlotlo. On that note, what would you say is your message to the world?
My message to the world is, number one, we all have a social responsibility. Sometimes it's a bit more difficult to tap into it, but we all have a social responsibility, whether it is advocacy work, whether it is creating more awareness about the entertainment space, whether it is leadership, whether we all have a social responsibility. And often our social responsibility is very linked to our passion. So if my message to the world is tap into that social responsibility, we all have to contribute in order to create that ideal society that we want to live in. Our forefathers and our mothers and our great mothers, they left us, they did what they could, and unfortunately they have left us. They've fought against slavery, they've fought against apartheid, they have fought against feminism as much, they fought towards feminism as much as they could, until it was their time to leave this ideal society. So what we need to do is take that baton and, take their hopes and their aspirations and their dreams and bring it actually into fruition. And we all need to create some kind of impact so that we are able to really create that ideal society that we all want to live in. And I can't do that alone. You can't do that alone. Presidents can't do that alone. We really need to come together as a society and create that ideal world that we need to live in. And that is through tapping our social responsibility. Once we all tap into our social responsibilities and stop living selfishly, I think that is when, we will create wonders. We will create, life that we could only imagine of, that we dream about. So I think tap into that social responsibility. That is my message to the world.
Mm-hmm. What I love about that is like kind of this thinking that you've got to live for something bigger than yourself, right?
Yes.
Such a thing as self-preservation and trying to preserve yourself, but really just making sure that as a person and as a human being, you live for something that ultimately outlives you, that others can use who come after you, to really position themselves in better spaces for impact, for advocacy, as you said, and just genuinely embodying something bigger than themselves. On the note, I really believe that a lot of people will be interested in getting in touch with you after this episode. I know a lot of my friends at ALA, who will be watching this episode next week, will be interested in feminism and talking to you and in getting in touch with the work that you're doing. On that note, how do you think our listeners and viewers can stay in touch with the work you're doing and your personal account?
Cool. So all social media is Miss_Morule. You can find me there everywhere. I'm talking Twitter, Instagram at Miss_Morule. That is who I am. Also Miss Morule. I go by that. When I introduce myself everywhere, I'm Miss Morule. And then secondly, you can also find Khulisa Mfazi everywhere. It's just the same, Khulisa_Mfazi everywhere, on your Instagram, Twitter, everywhere it's the same. And then my podcast, you can find it on Spotify and Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. Just search the Women's Club and you will find it, and you'll find many, many episodes that I think you can indulge in and just listen to. And I think you will be enriched by that. Yeah, and I'm excited for you guys to join me and just see the work that I'm doing. So do check me out.
Thank you so much, Letlotlo. I really believe that this episode, like with any girls who are now at home at such a certain time, like listening to your message is something that will really give them that hope to bulletproof themselves and really take a stand for things or ideas or types of lifestyle that they stand for. And I really appreciate that. Right, thank you so much. There you have it from Letlotlo Morule herself. Guys, please go read and follow the work that her organization is doing. As shared before, go make sure that you check out on her Instagram. Once again, here at the Leaders Podcast, we believe that as more and more young people grow conscious of their unique purpose, as they discover their hidden pearl, they essentially add value to society in the only way they can. Please remember to follow us on our Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Spotify, and Apple Podcast at The Leaders Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and share with at least 3 people who you believe will find this episode quite valuable. Until next time, thank you.